But if you're a guy and have never worn high heels, make sure that you get them about a half a size too big, and your calves are going to kill you the next day. So I don't know if you know that or not, but some of these ladies might be able to tell you high heels is not a fun way to walk. So my name is Cooke. I do work at the police department. Obviously, I'm a breast type 1. I've been there about 22 years, actually 22 and a half years. But I also do some teaching in colleges and stuff like that. So Dr. Johnson asked me to come in, and she gave me some topics that I'll make sure I cover. But also want to open up to some questions. Any question you want to ask. The old motto, there is no such thing as a stupid question. That is actually not true. There is such thing as a stupid question, but I'm pretty confident that you won't ask any of those. So if you think it's a stupid question, go ahead and ask it, and I'll let you know. Okay? All right. So, intro to criminal justice. And it's good to talk about where everybody got a copy of the Constitution, because that is basically what our laws, not only national, federal, local, but city laws, ordinances are also based off of the Constitution, interpretations of the Constitution. So we get into, and the first topic here, it talks about probable cause and articulable suspicion. So who can tell me what probable cause is? What is it?
For example, if you hear a report about somebody in a stolen car, and you see that stolen car going down the street, you have probable cause to stop the car.
Okay. Right. So we have probable cause, we have articulable suspicion. The way we like to describe it, and the way the courts have described it, is they call it Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. So we have a Tier 1 stop, a Tier 2 stop, a Tier 3 stop. Okay? Tier 1 is what we call a consensual encounter. So if I walk up to you and you're walking down the road, and I just walk up and say, hey, what are you doing? Okay? I have no real reason to be talking to you, right? Can you just walk away? Legally, yes, you can. You can just walk away. It's a Tier 1 stop. I just saw you. I may be walking up and asking you for directions. Heck, I may not know where I'm at. You never know, right? I may just be walking up to make a contact with you. So that Tier 1 stop is what we call a consensual encounter, which you can walk away from. Now, what we have a disagreement on, and we have this a lot of times with places, is that with the knowledge of the Tier 1 stop, a lot of people think that because the police are talking to me, it's just okay if I walk away. Well, it is if it's a Tier 1, but if it's a Tier 2 or a Tier 3, and I'm going to describe those, then legally you can't walk away, okay? So, the example of the stolen car is a good example of probable cause, which we call a Tier 3. Probable cause means I have enough information or enough evidence that a reasonable person would agree that I can arrest you, okay? If you're in a stolen car, and I stop you and you're in a stolen car, that's pretty much enough probable cause or enough reason for me to arrest you, right? Doesn't mean you're guilty, right? Guilt's something completely different, right? It just means that I have enough information to arrest you, okay? So let's change the circumstances a little bit and say a person wearing a black Beatles shirt just robbed a Subway and is walking down the street, walking down Thornton Avenue, okay? 5 minutes later, I see somebody at Thornton Walnut in a Beatles shirt, okay? Do I have enough probable cause to arrest him for a robbery? No. But what I have is what we call ARS, articulable reasonable suspicion, to get out and talk to him, right? Now, if he runs, can I chase him? Yes, okay? Because I've gone from the consensual encounter, the Tier 1, to now a Tier 2. I can articulate, or I can explain to the courts, right, that I received a call of a male wearing a black Beatles shirt. Okay, I can now say, look, I saw him in the vicinity. So under ARS, or reasonable suspicion, I can now do a Tier 2 stop, and I can get out and talk to him. Okay? Then what I'm going to do is, there's all kinds of lines of things we can do after that. We can start questioning him. We can do show-ups, lineups, and that's further down the road. But then we try to establish probable cause to make an arrest. Okay? So that's the premise when we talk about, what is articulable suspicion, what is probable cause, what is a consensual encounter. Okay? So if I stop you for speeding, okay, do you have to stop? Yes. Okay? Based on the fact that I have probable cause to stop you. Okay? Now, Traffic stops are a little different, but they can be the same thing. We don't do consensual encounters for traffic stops, okay? I can't legally see you driving down the road and say, hey, I like that guy's shirt, I'm gonna stop him and ask him where he got it, okay? I mean, I guess I could, but legally I can't do that, okay? Now, if I see him commit a violation of law, speeding, seatbelt, whatever it is, okay, that's probable cause, okay? What we're talking about is that tier 2, that one in the middle, that we talk about the word articulate. And when we talk about the word articulate, that's the word we use that basically says, okay, based on my training, based on my knowledge, based on court law and case law, okay, what am I seeing, what can I explain that a reasonable and prudent person, right, so all of y'all are reasonable and prudent, if I laid out the facts, you would say, yeah, there's a good reason to stop that person, okay? So we do that with vehicle stops as well. We call them suspicious vehicle stops, okay? It could be a lookout. So we have a lookout of a DUI driver in a dark sedan driving down Walnut Avenue with his windows down and his front bumpers off, right? And you see a car, black sedan, bumpers off, and they're just going 30 miles an hour, okay? I don't see a violation, right? So I don't have enough probable cause to stop it. But based on the circumstances, the factors, right, everything that I can explain, it's what they call a tier 2 stop, which allows the police to stop and investigate to determine if something is actually legitimate in that stop. Now, a lot of people have problems with that, and generally when I take complaints, I take a lot of professional standards internal affair complaints. I get a lot of complaints that people say, well, I wasn't breaking the law, so they weren't allowed to stop me. So it is something that we have a hard time, I think, explaining to people. You know, we talk about, and I've got something on here to talk about body cameras in the media, which is a really fun topic for me. But, you know, just understand those things, and if you don't understand, if you understand probable cause, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Fourth Amendment, probable cause and that articulable reasonable suspicion, you know, understand that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, how they're sequential. Tier 1's consensual, right? Tier 2 means that you can articulate or you can gain enough information for a reasonable person, and that's important, a reasonable person, okay? Not me as a police officer, not a lawyer, okay? Or not somebody that ain't got enough sense to kill, to do anything, right? But a reasonable person would believe that this person needs to be stopped or talked to. Okay? And generally, when we talk about that doctrine, it's pretty understandable. And then tier 3 is probable cause. That's, you have enough to make an arrest. Not a conviction, right? Just an arrest. Are people arrested that are not guilty? No, they're not. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the reason is because the standard for a conviction is much higher than it is for an arrest. And I'm sure you'll hear that here. You know, we talk about, and it's not on my thing, but, you know, the difference between beyond a reasonable doubt and a preponderance of evidence is different, okay? Probable cause is a very low threshold, okay? It's very easy to establish probable cause. It's a lot harder to get a conviction, and that's good, right? Because we don't want people arrested and then convicted if they're not guilty. And I'm sure you covered the whole civil versus criminal aspects of what it takes to be found guilty in a criminal trial versus a civil trial. Civil trial is a little bit easier. Okay. So, any questions about that? The articulable suspicion, probable cause?
Okay, so let's say you do have ARS or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you have to hold that person, you know, to question, to investigate, whatever, so you can get probable cause?
The courts say, and it's one of those subjective things, okay? The courts say you have a reasonable enough time as long as you're continuing to do your job, okay? And the courts say it's not unreasonable. So it could be a minute, it could be an hour, depending on the circumstances. What you're going to see in case law is so subjective that it's almost impossible to give a definitive answer on most things. And that's why they use the reasonable term. You know, when we talk about Graham v. Connor, which is the use of force standard, it's the standard by which we use force, federal standard, okay? And it talks about reasonable, and that's all it is. Is it reasonable? For instance, I'll tell you a funny story. This didn't happen to us, thank God. The state of Mississippi had a trooper who did a lot of drug interdiction. And he had a buddy that was a police chief in this little small town. They pulled this guy over and they asked him said to search the car. And the guy says no. And the guy says, well, I'm going to go get a police dog. So you're going to wait here while I go get a police dog. Okay, so we're articulable suspicion and now we're waiting. So the guy calls his chief buddy, okay, and says, hey, bring me your dog. And he's like, I can't, I'm hunting. He's like, well, go get your dog. So they did. So he drove over, left the place, went and got the dog, and then came to the traffic stop, about an hour and a half. Okay? Now, so the guy's sitting there on the side of the road an hour and a half. Now, we're not even going to throw out the fact this was not an actual police dog. It was just his dog. Okay? That's one thing. So, an hour and a half on the side of the road, is that too long to wait? The court said absolutely. Now I have seen cases 15, 20 minutes where people have had to sit on the side of the road and wait for an actual canine unit, and the court say that's fine. It all goes back to reasonable. What's the reason? Now, federal law is a little different too, and this is where it gets a little sketchy. Federal law, you have to also, on a search like that, when you're asking them to wait, federal law, you also have to show what are the factors that even made me ask to search that vehicle. And then why am I bringing a dog? They just won't let you do it. Hey, I stopped your car, I'm gonna bring a dog. State and local will allow that. Okay? But it goes back to reason. So same thing, if I stop him on the side of the road and maybe I'm waiting on the person to go interview somebody at Subway, I can hold on to him. Okay? They get down there and one of them's hurt. And they say, hey, we gotta put this person in a splint real quick. I can hold him. Okay? Then they call and say, hey, well, that person's now going to be in ICU. And I'm like, so what do I do now? If I don't have anything else, I'm either going to have to let him go or I'm going to have to determine if I have enough probable cause. And that's what the courts look at. They look, is that reason? But good question. Anybody else?
I've got a question.
Okay.
You say on tier 1, if you approach to a person for asking directions or anything in circumstances and he walks away, what if he starts running out of nowhere? You talk to him, that person just runs away from you, like legitimately runs away from you.
Well, the courts will say, well, maybe that person just forgot what they were doing. And that you have no legal right, if the police walk up to you in a tier 1, to answer, to talk, or do anything. You have the legal right to run away. Now, am I going to think that's weird? Probably. And I'm probably going to say, I need to figure out who the heck that was, because at some point in time, me and him need to have another conversation. But, yeah, absolutely. Now, is it hard to do for a police officer when you walk up and they just take off running? Yes. But what you have to remember, and this is something I worked a complaint on a while back, was we had a gentleman who had that knowledge, okay, about a tier 1 stop. And he knew that if the police did not have any reason whatsoever to stop him, he could run away. So he's walking down Walnut Avenue, College Drive, right over here in front of Chili's. And the police officer gets out and says, hey, hold on a second. And he takes off running because he knows tier 1, okay? Police officer chases him, tackles him. He's screaming, raising Cain about you have no reason to do that, okay? They arrest him and charge him with obstruction, okay? Now, I get the case, okay? So I asked the police officer, why were you getting out? Well, we had an armed robbery at a hotel 15 minutes ago up here in Rocky Face. The guy ran on foot towards College Drive, had on a pair of shorts and a bandana. Guess what this guy was wearing? A pair of shorts and a bandana. He matched matched the description to a T to this guy. Was it him? No, it was not him. What do you think the courts say about that charge? You think the courts say that charge is now no good because it wasn't him? The courts clearly state that the police officer had articulable reason, suspicion to get after him. Since he ran, he was guilty of obstruction. So, if you run, make sure that you don't match anything that's going on around, because it's going to go back to, did the police officer actually have a legal reason to stop you? And you're probably not going to know that. But a lot of that premise goes back to is most citizens do not react by running. They don't. Another perfect case of that was a guy who this is a weird case. It was actually our case, and it ended up going to the Georgia Supreme Court. But they saw a guy, and he was, they looked at him and said, oh, I know him, I know he has a warrant. And then, so they say, hey, stop, and he takes off running. They chase him through the woods, they finally catch him, get him back, check his ID, it wasn't the same guy, it was his cousin. They looked similar, right? But since they had a legal reason to get out with him and he ran, he violated state law. But he didn't know that at the time. But why was he running? Well, he was actually running because he thought he had a warrant. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why that person does it. It's all about, is there a legal reason to stop him in the first place?
Will he still get the charges for institution? You were saying that if I run and then all of a sudden it wasn't me, but I look like the description, would I still get the charges, or the charges will be dropped?
The obstruction charge is it's still valid. Now, a lot of courts will drop those charges, but the charge is valid. There's a difference between, we get into, there's a term that you probably won't hear, I don't know if you'll hear it here, it's called procedural justice.
We are going to be learning about that in Module 5.
Which basically says, okay, we have a lot of authority to do things, but that doesn't mean we should always do it. I mean, that's the premise of it, is treat people the way you want to be treated, okay? If I was in that situation, I wouldn't run, but if I did run, I wouldn't want to be charged with something and I didn't do anything wrong. So in that case, now, what it takes usually is the person gets arrested, it will take a supervisor or somebody from command staff coming in and saying, look guys, you know, let's big picture this, okay? Look, we don't need this charge. We don't need it. So, and most DAs won't charge that. Most DAs are going to look at what's going on underneath when you need to, because it's fair. And that's what procedural justice is be fair. So, any other questions?
Were you wearing a vest?
Yes.
Do you always wear a vest? Is there a particular-
Well, not to bed.
Yeah.
But other than
When
that,
you're in the
yes.
uniform, is there ever a time where you choose not to take the vest?
No.
Or what? No.
No, we actually have a requirement at our agency that we have to wear them, even if we're wearing like a polo shirt with a badge on it, is we have to wear them. Because even though I am in the office and I do internal affairs, if there's a hot call, I get beeped, which makes my radio go off, and then I will respond. Like when we had the Dalton High School shooting, our command staff, we were some of the first ones there, and we were going to go in the building. So you got to be ready. So, and actually, I had a friend who worked for Clayton County. He was a major, which was the #2 person, and he was riding to lunch and got out on a robbery call. Didn't have his vest on, was shot and killed. So you never know. So I always say, if you're wearing a badge and gun, you better have your vest on. So makes it pretty hot, though. I'll tell you that. Okay. Oh, yeah. Probably heard of this case. It's a 60s case, and I'm not good with numbers. 66, 67. Who's ever heard of Miranda? Not the cartoon, right? The case, U.S. Miranda versus Arizona. You would not believe how many court cases come out of Arizona. Miranda versus Arizona, Gant versus Arizona, a lot of real big cases come out of Arizona. Who knows why we have Miranda? Why is there a Miranda anyways? Where did it come from? Why do we have it?
They have the right to get arrested, but they have to tell you, but I forgot what the case is.
Right, and that's what Miranda is. It basically details your rights, right? Now, why do we have it? Why do we even have a Miranda, what they call a Miranda court decision? Or in this case, it was a precedent created to tell the police, hey, you got to do this. Why do we have it in the first place?
Some people might not know.
Say it? But people don't know, that's sure. But actually, it's because if you look at historically where court cases come from, court cases come from the police not doing what they should be doing. And in this case, police were interrogating people and using methods that, to be honest with you, are what led to a lot of false confessions, right? So, should I be able to hold you over a alligator pit and ask you if you committed a crime? Because you're probably going to admit to it no matter what, right? There was a court case that actually came out of Georgia, and it was thrown out before it got to the appellate court. And this was in the 50s, okay, 1950s. And the homicide unit for the Atlanta Police Department, they would go out and do interviews of homicide suspects, okay? And the way they interviewed them, has anybody ever been to the Atlanta Zoo? A couple people, okay. So it used to be a park, okay, a really big park. Used to be a hangout for drug dealers, stuff like that. Well, what the homicide unit and detectives would do is two of them would go out, take the suspect out to the park. They would park the car on top of this little hill. One of the detectives would walk the suspect down the hill. The other one would go to the back of the trunk, open up the trunk, take out a shovel and a bag of lye, and walk down. And he would say where he's going to talk or else. How many people do you think at that point confessed to a murder, even if they didn't do it? Would you confess if you thought the police were going to shoot and kill you? Yeah, absolutely. So what Miranda in essence said was, all right, you obviously like to fudge the rules, so the police from now on, when you arrest somebody, you've got to read them this, or read it to them so they understand it. Okay? Right to remain silent, right to an attorney, right? The good thing about it, and I can tell you this from experience, is the reason I still have a job and we're successful is because people do understand they have a right to be silent, they just don't exercise it. Okay? People are their worst enemies when it comes to being suspects in a crime. Usually they will try to talk their way out of it, and that's usually what catches them. So, the important thing to remember is if I arrest you, so, I'm not going to arrest you, me, no. So if I arrest her, okay, for DUI, okay, I arrest her, put her in handcuffs. You want to put you in handcuffs? What's up with the Beatles? Okay, anyway, so I arrest her, put her in handcuffs, right? Do I read her Miranda then? No.
Don't you do it while you're arresting?
No. When do I have to read her Miranda? Can I take her to jail and never read her Miranda? Yes, I can. Okay? Miranda is only if I'm going to, what? Interrogate you. Okay? If I say you're under arrest for DUI, I need you to do implied consent, and I was like, so, what you think about the Hawks? Okay, I'm not interrogating her. Okay, I'm not asking her for a confession. I've already got enough. I don't need anything else. I've got her driving. I've got her failing the field sobriety test. I've got her alcohol sensor reading. I got the fact that she threw up in the back of my car. I mean, I got all this stuff, right? So I don't need to interrogate her. Okay? Now, say I bring him in and I think he's a burglar. Okay? And I'm like, all right, I'm going to bring him in. He volunteers to come in. Okay? And he's sitting across the desk and I start asking about the burglary. Do I have to read him Miranda first? No. He's not in custody. Okay? So, if I tell him, I need you to sit there, you cannot leave. Okay? If you leave, you're going to jail. Now tell me about this burglary. At that point in time, I have now violated Miranda. Okay? He's in custody. He knows he can't leave. Okay? And it doesn't just have to be in handcuffs. Okay? I can put her in the back of the car. If you're in the back of the police car and I close the door, do you have any expectation I'm going to let you go? Probably not. Okay? So if I think you're in custody or you think you're in custody and I want to interrogate you, that's when Miranda applies. So all the time you see the movies where they say, you didn't read me my Miranda rights. Okay? Miranda rights only apply to a confession. Now, if I do speak to him, okay, and I say, you can't leave, okay, and I'm going to get a confession out of you, and by gosh, sure, and he gives me a confession, okay, and I arrest him for burglary, okay, the rest is not bad, the confession is what's bad under Miranda, okay. We're going to talk about, fruits of the poisonous tree and all that, but you have to remember that Miranda only applies to a confession. It does not apply to an arrest. So, when we talk about Miranda and we read Miranda, it's only before your question, okay, or interrogated. Now, if I'm going to interview you, and I've had this happen before, where I walk up to somebody and I'm like, all right, we know somebody shot a gun. Did y'all see anything? And she goes, I shot him. Okay, well, I didn't read Miranda. Is it still okay? Absolutely. Because I was not interrogating her. She wasn't in custody. She gave that freely to me. Okay? And that's what the courts look at. The two things they look at is custody is the biggest one. Was that person in custody or did they think they were in custody? Because you know as well as I do, police try to find ways around little loopholes every once in a while, and they get slapped in the face. The courts will smack them back down and say, you can't do that, okay? You can't put them in the car in handcuffs, but leave the door open. That's still custody, right? Because if you're in handcuffs, you probably think you're under arrest. Now, if I put you in handcuffs and say, you're not under arrest, and I put you in the back of the car and say, oh, by the way, you're not under arrest, and then start talking to you, do you think you're in custody? Yes. Okay. I can try to say, well, I told him he wasn't under arrest. But the courts don't look at it that way. The courts say, look, what would a reasonable person think at the time? And at the time, I would say if you're in handcuffs in the back of the car, even if I tell you you're not under arrest, you probably don't think you're free to leave, do you? And that's what custody is. Has nothing to do with handcuffs. Do you feel like you're free to leave? So on a traffic stop, are you in custody? Are you free to leave? If I pull you over for a traffic violation and I'm sitting there talking to you on the side of the road, are you free to leave? No. Are you in custody? Technically. Technically, you're in custody. Why doesn't Miranda apply then? What if I ask you, why the heck were you going so fast? You get speeding tickets a lot. I wasn't asking that question regularly. We're supposed to answer it. Okay? But what happens? So if I'm asking you these questions, is that a line of questioning? The courts have clarified that a traffic stop is considered, while in custody, it's a temporary detention. And Miranda does not apply. Now, the difference would be is if I say I pull this, I gotta quit pulling you over. You get pulled over a lot. I don't know. Are you? Yes, she does. Okay. No. Okay. So if I pull her over, and I've had dealings with her in the past, and I know she has a suspended license, right? And I pull her over, and I was like, "Aren't you still suspended?" And she goes, "Yeah." So and then I was like, "All right. Well, hey, wait. Have you been drinking?" "Yeah, I've been drinking a little bit." And I get her out to do field sobriety and start talking to her. Well, what about Miranda? It's a traffic stop, but what have I deduced, or what have I decided in my mind? That she's what? She's going to jail. Suspended license, she's going to jail. So as soon as I determine and know in my mind that she's in custody, Miranda applies. So I would have to read her Miranda before I asked her any other questions about the crime. Okay? I could ask her how the Hawks did or why she's wearing a Beatles shirt. But if I was going to interrogate her after I knew she was going to jail, that's when Miranda applies. So,
Do you have like a physical copy of the Miranda rights? Like what if somebody is dead?
I don't.
You don't?
I do. It's in my other shirt. I do have a copy.
So what if you gotta arrest somebody?
That doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen at all?
That not for me. No. If I have to arrest somebody, I'm gonna call somebody to do it. I mean, that's only because I'm professional standards. So any complaint, excessive force, anything like that, I have to work it. So that's why I don't make arrests.
So the person who is making the arrest.
Yes.
What if they're deaf and they're blind? So what happens then? Because they gotta be right in Miranda rights.
Right. That's
So
right.
how are they-
The onus on making sure that the person understands them is on the officer. Okay? So if the person is deaf and blind, first I'd like to know what crime they committed. But there have been cases, okay, when we do people that, we have people that are arrested that are blind. No, deaf, not blind. I don't think I've ever seen anybody that was blind arrested. Could be wrong. I don't remember. Deaf, yes. We have a lot of people that are deaf and get arrested. If they're deaf, then what generally happens is you take the card out, and we actually have them blown up at the jail and at the interview rooms, and we'll show it to them. And we'll have them look at it, and then we'll write a statement out. Do you understand? And have them sign. Now, the interesting thing is, what if they don't speak English? What if they only speak Farsi or speak Spanish? Are we required to read it in their language, make sure they understand it in their language? Answer is no. You want to do that because you don't want to have a bad case, but there's no legal requirement that we read it to them in their language. We're only required to read it to them in English. Now, what's going to happen in the courts is the courts are going to say, okay, did they really understand it? And what's your answer going to be? No. Okay? So, most agencies now have it in different language. The court doesn't require it, but you're not going to get a conviction. You're definitely not going to get the confession admitted without showing it. One other thing that has come out of Miranda and some court cases is, does anybody in here know somebody that's not too bright? You don't have to name them. You don't have to tell me who they are. Okay? They may be a relative of yours, maybe a friend of yours, right? You know, you ask them 2 + 2 and they're like, can you repeat the question? You know what I'm talking about? He's like, yeah, I know exactly. Y'all got somebody pictured in your mind? One of the things we are responsible to do is to make sure that the person understands their rights, okay? So we actually have to show the line of questioning to show that we knew that they were capable of understanding that. And what we do a lot of times, we say, okay, what grade school did you complete? If they say 3rd grade, okay, you're like, okay, I might need to ask some more questions, right? But if they tell you they have a college degree, you can probably make an inference, right? You can probably jump to a conclusion that they probably understand what you're talking about. With juveniles, children, right? And who in here, nobody in here is 17, right? Everybody's at least 18. 16-year-old is juvenile in the state of Georgia. 17-year-old is an adult. So for juveniles, we have to do the same thing because juveniles don't have the same level of what? Recognition. So we actually have what we call the juvenile Miranda rights, which is where we say you have the right to remain silent. And then we add, you don't have to talk to me unless you want to. You put it in a plain, simple language so you can make sure they understand it. Now, that is not a legal requirement, but most agencies do that because you want to make sure if you get a confession that you have one that's going to hold up in court. Because a bad confession doesn't do any good at all, right? And it goes back to that procedural justice. Be fair. So, I think everybody understands Miranda. Any questions about Miranda?
Another question.
That's what killing me over here.
Like you say that law enforcement are not required to translate to non-speaking English.
That's correct.
Wouldn't that be a fail for reading the Miranda rights to them versus if you arrest someone, put them in custody, and you still question them, but you never read the Miranda rights?
Right, it is. And that's what I'm saying is there's no legal requirement, but you're never going to have a confession that's ever going to be admitted, okay, if the person doesn't understand. Because, I mean, it's our responsibility to make sure they understand. Now, that has never been adjudicated in court, okay, that it means you have to read the language. But it has been adjudicated to say if the person does not understand their rights, you can't use their confession. And that's why everybody's adapted it. We have implied consent, which is what you get read after a DUI. Has nothing to do with Miranda. We have no requirement but to read it in English. But most places will read it in whatever language. They have it in different languages. And then they will usually have somebody that speaks that language to make sure that they understand it. Because it goes back to fairness. It's not fair if I read you something in English and you don't understand it. So, but if that's the case then, if I read you something in English, I'm probably not going to understand your confession anyways.
Okay, let's say you arrest me. I understand how Miranda.
Okay.
You arrest me, I'm guilty and everything,
Uh-huh.
but you start questioning me, you haven't said my Miranda rights. What's the consequences for you for not saying it to me? You never said it, even though, has that
Okay.
happened before?
Well, yeah, it happens all the time. It's going to be more of a policy violation, like an internal violation. It goes to intent, okay? Police can be held liably, civilly, okay, and criminally, and federally criminally, okay, for intentionally violating your rights, okay? And in federal code, it's USC code, okay? Conspiracy or, basically, if they intend to violate your rights, okay? Now, if somebody just forgets to do it or is not trained properly, then those are different avenues. But there are criminal and civil sanctions available if you knowingly violate somebody's civil rights. And that is, even though that's not a constitutional right, it does fall under an interpretation of a constitutional right. So even though it's not an amendment, okay, because the Miranda is not an amendment, right? But there is one about not incriminating yourself, right? Fifth Amendment. So it goes back to constitutional rights, yes, criminal or civil. Okay. All right. We only have up to 20 minutes, is that right?
You've got about 35 minutes.
Okay, well, I guess I can't tell time. I'm sorry about that. Not part of the police academy. All right, so it says on here, Fourth Amendment, exclusionary rule. A lot of those go together. So who can tell me what the Fourth Amendment basically covers? Starts with search, ends in seizure. Has and in the middle.
Seizure and search.
No unreasonable search.
Search and seizure. Search and seizure. Perfect. Somebody said it backwards, but that's okay. Search and seizure, right? So it has to do with searching, okay, and seizing, okay? So arresting, okay? Arrest is a pretty easy one because it's based on what? Starts with probable, ends with cause. Probable cause, right? So we know that that's an arrest, okay? But the Fourth Amendment basically says you can't be arrested, okay, without probable cause, okay? Easy. Searches is you could actually have about a 3-day class on search, laws about searches, because basically the Constitution says that you cannot be searched without a search warrant. Bottom line, okay? That's the way it was written, okay? There are some exceptions in there, but pretty much it was written that way, okay? And then we have this thing called the Supreme Court, right? And all these federal courts that have interpreted the Constitution over the last 200 plus years, right? And they have created what we call exclusions, okay? Exclusions to the Search Amendment rule, okay? Which gives police the ability to do searches without a warrant, okay? We still try to do searches with a warrant if we can, okay? But there are several instances when search warrants are not required. Does anybody know one? Name one?
Is it like plain sight?
This one, plain sight.
And like, you get pulled over, you can smell like marijuana or alcohol in the car.
Okay, all right, so the one he calls plain view, the plain view doctrine, which basically says if you're sitting on a park bench and I walk up and you have marijuana in your hand, right, and then you look at me and you shove it in your pocket, well, I don't have to go get a warrant to get the marijuana, okay, because you just gave me, it's plain view, it's in plain view, right, pretty simple. The open field doctrine, kind of similar to the plain view, which says if we're flying overhead, going somewhere, we look down and there's a bunch of marijuana plants, right? It's the plain view doctrine. Now, it's easy to get a warrant on something like that. But the one you're talking about is probably the hardest one to really define. And we call it the probable cause search, but it's also called the movable vehicle exemption, okay? Which says that if you have probable cause to search a vehicle, okay, same standard of arrest, not just suspicion, probable cause, okay, to search a vehicle, you can do so without a warrant because it is so easy to move that car and hide evidence. Okay, now what you described is one of the probable cause searches, which is if an officer walks up and says, smell the burnt odor of marijuana, right? I now have no probable cause, and that's true. Okay, a dog detected on a vehicle is probable cause. Okay, now what we advise people to do most of the time is if you do have probable cause and you can seize the vehicle, to seize it, get a warrant. But that is an exception. There's other exceptions that aren't used as much. There's one called the hot pursuit doctrine, and this is what I call the you can't call base rule. Okay, and I've actually had this before. These are funny. And whenever I leave, I'll be able to take all my videos with me and make a compilation. But I've had people before that you get behind for DUI, and they drive to their house. They get out of their car and they run up on the porch and they turn around and go, "Ha ha, I'm home." I'm like, okay. And then you walk right up and you arrest them because they have that general understanding of, well, I'm at my house, so you can't search me. You can't do nothing. I made it to my house. Or they'll run in the door. They'll go inside because they've heard that police cannot enter without what? A search warrant. But guess what? If I'm chasing you, I can. Okay? If we're chasing somebody with a warrant and he runs into his house, we can go right in behind him and chase him. Okay? It's called the hot pursuit doctrine. Okay? Which means that we don't have to stop at the door just because you made it to base. Okay? Now, that's been loosely interpreted, and I've actually seen this before. We had a case very similar that we looked at, and I think we were good. And we found some case law that backed it up, but the police knocked on the door, and we're standing at the door, okay? Lady answers the door, and they're sitting there, and a guy comes around the corner, unbeknownst, didn't know the police were standing there, goes, "Ugh," and they recognize him and knows he has a warrant, and he runs upstairs. Well, do the police have to have permission now to go in? No, they don't. They can just right off the thing, okay? What you have to remember on the difference when I talk about that movable exception, and I'm glad you talked about the marijuana smell. So, if I walk up to a house, knock on the door, lady opens the door, and I can smell marijuana, right? Like they've got 8 bongs going, right? And I'm like, oh my crap, how many people are here? And she's like, well, there's only 2 of us, okay? Well, can I search? No, why not? Because I can't move a house, remember? The car is a difference because it's movable. That's why they call it the movable exception. So it's a house, okay? I can ask her for consent, and she can tell me no. And then what I can do then is I can take everybody out of the house, close the door, go get a warrant, come back and search. But I can't search based on probable cause, a house, only a car, or a movable object, like an airplane, okay? Now, how about an RV? What about an RV? Mobile home. It's movable, right? So what if somebody has driven it into one of those RV lots and has those nice little cool things around the tires, and they got the canopy down and they're just hanging out? Is that now a house or is it an RV? It's movable, but you could argue that a double wide is movable, right? Until you take the wheels off of it, right? Single wide definitely has the wheels on it, right? Courts have said it depends. It depends on the factors of the case. How long have they been there? What was their intention? You know, if they were there for a month, I think you have a hard time arguing that it's movable. I think you could honestly say that they probably think that's their house, right? So, what is their expectation? What is the person's expectation? We'll go back to that reasonable, prudent person, right? Most people, if I ask you in here, if somebody's parked in an RV lot and they've been there a month and they got all their stuff hanging out and they're cooking dinner and all that stuff, what's the likelihood that you would call that where they're living? Anybody in here think that they're not living there right now? More than likely they are. So that's where you get into that movable exception and making sure you have the movable exception. Excuse me. Plain new document. Talked about that already. See if I can. One thing, and I think we can go back to Miranda a little bit on this. Have y'all heard of the poisonous tree doctrine?
They will read it in the next chapter.
They will? Okay. So poisonous tree doctrine basically says, has anybody ever eaten a bad apple? You didn't know it was bad, but you took a bite anyway? And then you're like, oh man, this is terrible. Okay. That's where the whole poisonous tree doctrine comes from, which is one bad apple, right, runs a bunch. Okay? So if I have a bad confession, okay, everything else I gain from that confession is what? Also bad. So if I have a bad confession which leads to a good search, a good arrest, a good conviction, they go back and find that bad confession, everything else is gone. It's the poisonous tree doctrine. It basically says, if you poisoned it here, you poisoned everything afterwards. Now there's exceptions to everything, I'm afraid. There's some exceptions to that as well. There are some court cases that basically say, even if there was a bad something here, if you reasonably would have still found out this information, you can allow some of it in. Okay? So for instance, a co-conspirator comes forward and says, yeah, we hid the gun here. Okay? You can show that that search had nothing to do with this confession, you can still bring it in. But for the most part, and that you talk about things, that could be done about a bad Miranda case, is that's where we get into is pretty much everything found from a bad confession or search or anything like that is thrown out. You see it all the time if you ever watch Law and Order. They always do these motions to exclude evidence, and that's generally what those are. We have exclusionary hearings. We have Jackson-Deno hearings, which are the ones that throw out confessions. We have search hearings. which are like consent hearings to determine was it valid consent. And that's a whole different ballgame, because really, if you think about searching without a warrant, most searches are consent searches. People allow you to search. So if you knew you had something in your house, why would you allow people to search it? But they do, all the time. Why? A lot of times because they think they haven't hid well, right? A lot of times they feel like, well, if I let them search, they'll hurry and get their warrant. But we do see that with consent. Consent's a very tough one to overcome because it's a he said, she said, right? It's your word against theirs. Now, we have body cameras, we have video, we have audio, we have all these things now that help that. We even have a consent card that we use where they read it and sign it, stating that they understand they're not allowed, or they're allowed to say no. They can stop the search at any time. And they'll sign them. They let us search them. Find the dope anyway. They don't care. So that's pretty much what we get into when we talk about the search and seizure with the exclusionary rule, the movable vehicle exemption, things like that. And then the poisonous tree doctrine, which there's a lot of good case law out there about poisonous tree doctrine. I think hopefully you'll get into in the chapter. I don't think I've ever read the book. I'll read exceptions. We talked about that. Hot pursuit. Emergency searches. I didn't talk about that. We go back to search without a warrant. We get a call of a disturbance at a residence, a house, like an apartment complex. And you walk up and you hear two people fighting upstairs. Knock on the door, no answer. You can still hear them fighting. Right? She's screaming, he's screaming. What do? You gotta go get a warrant. What do? You kick the door in? Yes. It's called the emergency situation. Okay? The term is exigent circumstances. It's the actual term of it. Exigency means there's something different in this situation, right? You can articulate that because these people, somebody was getting hurt or is in danger, that you no longer need a warrant to kick that door in and go up, okay? Now, you go up there, tackle both of them, right? Tase one of them, fight them, get them both in the handcuffs, figure out one person's the aggressor, all right? Then I'm going to start looking around in the closets, I'm going to start looking around the doors, stuff like that, right? Is that okay? No, because I entered based on what? The exigency of what? That somebody was in danger. So I can't then parallel that and say, well, now I'm in, I'm going to start looking around. No. If I want to do that, I have to establish probable cause. I'm only allowed to be in there for that reason. It goes so far that in a homicide case, so if we get a call of a dead person that's been killed, murder, you go to the scene and they're the only person there, okay? We're going to go in and we're going to do what? What do you think we're going to do first? First, make sure they're dead, okay? Without a search warrant, we're going to check the residence for what? What do you think we're looking for? Other victims, right? And bad guys. Once we know it's secure, you think we're going to go get a search warrant? The person's dead. Absolutely. Because we're only allowed to search a residence for the protection of people. Okay? He don't need to be protected anymore. He's dead. Right? So we're going to back up. We're going to secure him. Do whatever we need to do with him. Okay? Call a coroner. And we're going to get a search warrant to search the residence to make sure, because what happens if it was his wife or his spouse that killed him? Did we violate her rights by searching that house without a warrant? The answer is yes. So you have to understand all those small facets of it and what is the reason behind the search. For the most part, you're not supposed to search without a warrant, except for those exceptions. Did you have a question? Did anybody have any questions? So talk about body cameras a little bit. Obviously, you see I don't have one. We do have quite a few of them out there. Who has seen a body cam video on TV? Usually it's the police either beating somebody up or shooting them, right? Heavy issues what it is. They don't release the ones where, they're just hanging out eating oranges and stuff. They're usually something pretty violent, right? I saw that they just released the one from Louisiana. I guess it was 2 years ago. They just released it in the last couple of days. I don't know if anybody's seen it or not. Alton Sterling, I think was his name.
Oh, that's the, Sterling was South Carolina.
Yeah, Alton Sterling was standing in front of a convenience store in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
No,
Baton
I
Rouge.
think the name is wrong. Something Sterling is South Carolina. I can't remember the
Yeah,
name of the
but
movie,
anyway, this guy was standing there. Call was something was going on, but they got the body cam video, shows them get behind him, pulling a gun out, pointing at his head, cussing at him, and then there's a scuffle, and he ends up getting shot. And the officers were fired. They were not criminally charged. They were fired for violating policy, streaming obscenities at people is what they ended up firing for. But the thing about body camera video, who in here does magic? You don't have to admit it if you think magic's kind of weird. Okay, I'm not a magician, I'm just asking. Okay. Who understands why does magic work? Anybody know? You ever studied the human brain?
But they said you deceive people.
Because you can deceive people. Why can you deceive people so easily? Right, it's all sleight of hand, right? But really, what is it? Why does magic work? Why is it all the time you see, things happen, right? So what are you looking at? But she's not looking at anything else, right? So whatever I'm doing out here, she's not paying attention to. There's some interesting studies out there about the brain and the fact that, most of the things you see in front of you is from memory. Not actually what you're seeing, it's memory. That you can't process everything fast enough to see everything at the same time. So I can't see everybody here. I'm basically, when I'm looking around the room, a lot of this is memory. Just what I've learned just while you've been sitting here, okay? That's why I can do stuff right in front of you and you never see it, okay? Because the mind can't process that fast. Have you ever heard the term tunnel vision? Right, tunnel vision is you get so locked in on one thing that everything else peripherally is gone, okay? Now, so if I ask you, what is the likelihood that what you see on the body camera is what the police officer sees? What do you think the likelihood of that is? What I just told you, right? What am I doing right now? Where's the body cam facing? Okay. Am I seeing anything over there? No. So body camera gives a lot of good footage, but you have to take it for what it is. It's giving you more than the officer sees. It's giving you more that's happening out there, okay? And you also have to imagine, and you also have to remember that everything the officer sees, or the other people see, okay, may or may not be actually happening. It may be part of their memory. So, in saying that, we see a lot of cases where the body camera is facing one way, the officer is looking another way, and something happens, and you're like, but he was looking right at it. How could he not see? How could he not see that person didn't have a gun? Well, it depends. Where was he looking? Why do we have people that are shot with cell phone cameras? Why are people shot with cell phone cameras and the police officer says, I thought it was a gun? Nerves. Stress. Right? Right. A lot of different things, okay? So you're sitting here, okay? I got my body camera here, I'm looking over, and my partner walks up and he looks at this guy and yells, gun, and I look, and he's got a camera in his hand, and I pull my gun out and shoot him. Do you think that the police officer actually thought he'd shoot something to the camera? Is it possible, okay? Is it possible that based on what I just told you, that when he turned and looked, all he saw was something in his hand? And doing something on a split second. That's why body camera footage is excellent, okay? It's the way of the future. It's funny that we talk about body cameras now when we have had in-car cameras since the early 90s. Okay? So now we have body cameras. Now, body cameras have been rolled out for about 4 or 5 years. The body cameras were rolled out initially under the 20th Century Policing Initiative. That was one of the big things to talk about body cameras, okay? And it said that we want to use body cameras to prove to the public, okay, that officers aren't doing bad things. Okay, that this puts a level of accountability. What do you think the research has shown so far about body cameras? Do you think it has increased accountability? Not much. What has it done? It has actually made bad people not act a fool when they're in front of the camera. So what we've seen is that when officers are wearing body cameras, suspects are less aggressive because they know they're being recorded. So it's kind of an unknown benefit. And a lot of times we now use body camera footage to work a complaint and then to refute what the complaint is. So a lot of times we've seen that the body cam footage will actually exonerate the officer versus actually get them in trouble. So is that going to say that there's not bad apples? Absolutely not. You talk about the case in South Carolina. The guy that was convicted of murder.
Oh, you know what, that was Walter Scott, so yeah.
North-
I had the names back from South Carolina, Walter Scott.
North Charleston Police Department.
Yep.
Guy shot him, threw the taser down, kicked it. I mean, it's about a clear-cut case of murder as you can get, right? We look at Graham v. Connor, reasonable force. There was none of that. That was murder. I mean, you can't argue against that. Is that going to happen? Yes. Okay. Are there going to be people that do things wrong in our profession? Absolutely, all the time. I love when I talk to community groups all the time. I always get that question, which is, you know, why are there so many shootings and beatings and all that that are going on? And I ask, and I bring up some interesting facts, which is, does anybody know how many citizens we have here in Dalton? Approximately.
About 33,000.
Okay. How about in the county?
I guess over 100,000.
Yeah, about 110,000. We actually have somewhere between 120 and 130,000 people go through the city every day. How many times do you think the Dalton Police Department, we have 90 police officers, okay? 35,000 citizens, we have hundreds of contacts a day. How many times do you think we use force? Force is defined as either fighting, shooting, tasing, sticks, something, scuffling. How many times?
Force maybe a few times a day, that's not a problem.
Okay. All right. All right. So on average, over the last 10 years, it's somewhere between 120 and 180 times a year. Less than one a day. Less than two a day. Okay? Now, out of that, we talk about arrests, okay? What is the national average for how many times when people are arrested that the police use force to effect that arrest? So how often when somebody gets arrested do the police have to fight them or do something? 0.01%. So about 1 out of every 1,000 arrests. You have to use some level of force. Okay? If you look at the pure numbers of the use of force cases that are going on, it is tragic that we have police kill people, either murder, manslaughter, or some other kind of negligence, but the numbers are very low. We know that from the numbers. Now, just like with anything else, you know, if I was a doctor and we did something bad malpractice, okay, that's what's going to make the news. We see the positive side because we see all the cases that don't exist. And that's why I think body cams are important, because I think it's going to continue to exonerate a lot of people. We use it all the time to exonerate people for complaints all the time. Our average is about 98% of all the complaints that come through my office. We can use some kind of avenue to prove that the person was either trying to get out of a ticket, trying to get out of an arrest, or was mad at the officer. And that the officer did nothing wrong. And I'm not talking about just a he said, she said. We have ways with either video cameras, audio, something like that. A lot of our guys carry audio that they don't have to tell anybody about. Do you know you're in a one-party state? I mean, even know what that means. You should know. Has anybody ever here tried to eavesdrop on a girlfriend or a boyfriend? Try to listen in on a conversation? What it means by a party state, some states are two-party states. Some states are one-party states. Georgia is a one-party state, which means I can record you anytime I want, as long as I know. As long as one party knows about the recording, you can do it covertly. Some states require both. Arizona's one. We saw that with a Rick Romney, I guess. was recorded. He was giving a speech in a house, and somebody recorded him. The person that recorded him actually did so illegally because the person that was talking did not give consent. That's a two-party state. We're in a one-party state. So that's why a lot of our guys carry audio, backup audio, so that they're actually recording everything that's happening. So that if somebody does complain, you can just pull it out, rewind it, and play. We used to not have to do that nowadays with all the technology. So body cameras are good. I won't even talk about the media. What I say about the media, well, I will say something about the media, is everybody in here gets their news from somewhere, right? Okay? Whether you're left, whether you're right, whether you're right down the middle, be open-minded with the media. Okay? I always say believe in your local media because your local media has a vested interest in the community. The national media doesn't care, okay, about local people and local positions. Okay? They want to come in, they're going to do whatever they can to get their ratings, and they're going to get out. Your local media is usually very close to the middle of what's going on. Your national media, you've seen that before, right? Everybody says, if you want to know what the right believes, watch Fox. If you want to watch the left, watch CNN, and you're probably going to find out that it's somewhere in between, right? And that's just normal. You see that with the national media. Who knows the national campaign called Hands Up, Don't Shoot? Who's heard of it? Hands Up, Don't Shoot. All the people that are rioting and they're walking around, hands up, don't shoot. You know what I'm saying?
It was like from Ferguson, right?
Right, Ferguson, Missouri, right? Now that is still the moniker now. You shoot an unarmed person and they walk around chanting, hands up, don't shoot. Now why is that significant? Has anybody actually read the transcripts of the Ferguson hearings? Okay? Never had his hands up. There was one witness that said that he had his hands up, and that witness was actually found out to be that witness was never there. And that account started on Facebook. Okay? So the whole hands up, don't shoot narrative didn't even apply to that case, but it became the narrative. Okay? We see that with a lot of things. And I will go, and I don't think use of force is on here, but I'm going to talk about one more thing. But let me talk about this real quick and use of force. Is it legal for the police to shoot somebody in the back? Who thinks it's okay? Who says yes, the police can shoot somebody in the back? Intentionally. Like, he's running away, I'm going to shoot him. Anybody? Huh?
I would say yes if they're running.
Okay. All right. So, right. There is a case. I'm terrible at cases. Tennessee versus Garner.
Oh, yeah, Tennessee v. Garner.
Okay. Tennessee v. Garner says that basically Tennessee used to have a law that said that if a felon ran away from you, you can shoot him to stop him. Okay. Supreme Court said no, you can't do that. Okay. Unless there's some reason, okay, that you can justify, you can't just shoot people in the back. Okay. Georgia has a code section. Okay, it has two different code sections. One is for citizens, your ability to use force to defend yourself, right? There's another one that's police. Ours is the same as yours, except for there's one caveat that says we have a legal duty to shoot a fleeing felon if we can articulate that by letting them escape, they're going to do more harm. Okay? For example, okay, you're with somebody and the person tells you, I'm going to go inside and kill everybody in that building. They turn around and run into the building. You can legally shoot them to stop them from doing that. Whether it's in the back or the front, it doesn't matter. Okay? You're in a shootout with somebody and they start to jump a fence. You can legally shoot that person because you can say, look, if they're shooting it up with me, wherever they go, they're going to continue on their streak. Okay? They've already proven, okay, that they're going to use aggravated felonies, they're going to be an aggravated felon, so you can justify that. Now, what you see a lot of times in media cases and cases where people are shot in the back, goes back to that magic, okay? Which is, has anybody in here ever read anything about perception and reaction? The difference between reaction time and perception time? How long does it take you to perceive and react to something? Does anybody know? You ever read the science on that? Why do they tell you to not follow behind a car? Why do they tell you to not tailgate? Right? Because it takes you a long time to perceive and react. Okay? So, the normal person that's really paying attention takes 3/4 of a second to 1.5 seconds to react. Okay? So if something happens in front of you and you're driving a car, okay? You're not even going to start to move your foot for at least 3/4 of a second. You're driving 50 miles an hour, that's 75 feet per second. You're going to travel 75 feet before your foot even moves. Then it's going to take you about another 1 to 2 seconds to react and start to react. Okay? So about 3 seconds in is when your foot's probably going to hit the brake. And you've now traveled 225 feet. Okay? Now, in saying that, I have somebody in front of me that's shooting a gun at me, and I'm shooting back, and I hit them. And when you get hit, what do? Do you continue to stand there perfect like this? Oh, I got hit. Yeah, I'm still. No, what happens? You're going to move, right? And a lot of times what happens when you get shot, you do what? You spin, right? And I'm going to spin, and I'm going to fall this way. They don't fall forward. They fall this way, okay? So if I just told you it takes 3 seconds to react, I'm shooting you, and then now you're turned away, why am I still shooting? Because I still haven't reacted to you moving. And it takes some time, and that's why we see people that are shot in these deadly force situations. They're shot multiple times, and a lot of times they are shot in the back because the officer will continue to shoot even when the person's on the ground until their brain goes, hey, it's over. And they will continue for 2 or 3 seconds. Has anybody here ever shot a gun? How many rounds can you get off in 2 or 3 seconds? Bunch, right? Doesn't mean you're going to hit anything, but you can throw a lot of rounds down range. So, now that's what I talk about when I talk about the perspective, and having that under perspective. Criminal justice is more about, we talk about to our police officers about communication, and for them it's about mental toughness. Because you have to mentally understand everything that's going on, and understand why the media says this, but you know it to be true different way. So it's a very tough thing. And then, I know I've got a couple minutes, but I want to talk about this real quick about the our addiction stuff. I do actually have this. I have Narcan. Have you ever heard of Narcan? Okay. So I have Narcan because of the opioid epidemic, right? If somebody fell out with opioid, I can squish and they'd be waking up. Good stuff. We have a lot of overdoses all the time. Has anybody here heard of the Georgia's Good Samaritan law? Okay, so say you three are at a party, okay, and y'all are smoking weed, doing a couple lines of cocaine, right? And this gentleman just falls over. Done. He just fell over, right? Now, what has happened in the past is these two guys are like, what? Sucks to be him. I'm gone, right? I'm going to take my dope, I'm running out the door because I don't want to get in trouble, right? But the problem is 9 times out of 10, this guy dies. And we find him the next day dead, and we go back and we're like, why'd y'all leave your buddy? We didn't want to get in trouble, right? So the state of Georgia passed a thing that said, look, you have somebody in your vicinity that is struggling with not an addiction, but if they're having a problem, medical problem, because of drug overdose or something like that, it's okay to call EMS, fire, police, okay? When they get there, they're going to take care of him, okay? Then they're going to look and they're going to see the cocaine and marijuana. They're going to take it, but they're not going to charge him. Because it's more important to make sure he lives than to charge these two guys with a drug offense, okay? And that's what the Good Samaritan law is all about. It basically says, hey, you know, we're not going to come in and make charges on stuff we find as long as you do the right thing and call and try to get somebody help in a situation like that. And it also includes alcohol. We had a girl at a hotel right over here on Holiday Drive. Holiday Drive, actually. They found her in a hotel dead. She was 19 years old. About 20 people were in the room when she passed out. What do you think they did? All of them left her there tonight. Okay? Because what? They didn't want to get in trouble. Now, that law had not passed at that point. That was probably about 10 years ago. Okay. So, that law is there. I would definitely say read up on it. It's what gives you the ability. A A lot of states now allow you to buy Narcan over the counter. If you know somebody that has an opioid addiction, anybody in your family, I know you can get it in Tennessee over the counter, but this stuff works. I've used it twice. I mean, people that are like 5 beats per second, you hit them once each nostril, and they're up, ready to fight you. It works that fast. If you don't understand what Narcan is, Narcan has actually been used in the hospitals for 40 or 50 years. But whenever you get put under to go to sleep, like in a surgery, and they might give you a little bit too much, this is what brings you out. And that's why people don't die while during surgery, because of Narcan. So, and they will bring you out, put you back under, and unfortunately, because of the medical profession, they don't have to notify you that it happened. Pretty messed up. But I don't want to scare anybody about having surgery. So, I know I sped through that last part a little bit. Anybody have any questions about the Good Samaritan law? It's not really been well publicized, unfortunately. I know the person that got it started. Her daughter had never used drugs before and got a hold of something she didn't even know what it was. Her friends gave it to her. She fell out. They left her there. She died. So she's the one that got passed. So it's a good thing. But if you're ever in a situation like that, call 911. Don't worry about getting in trouble. Okay. And I'm not saying that somebody won't get you in trouble, but you're not going to go to jail. How's that? Anybody have any questions? I know our time's up, but I'll stay here just a couple seconds if anybody has any additional questions. Thank you. Anything else?
But go ahead, thank you very much for your time. The only announcements I have, one, just a reminder, your next quiz is going to be tomorrow over Module 4. Today, Module 5 opens up. And I think that's pretty much it. Then use around for a few minutes if you want to stay and ask a few other questions.
Not you. Y'all are out.
Oh, we're here.
Y'all are
No, we're here.
Y'all are
We're
staying.
staying.
No more questions.
We're staying. We're going.
I'll do that too. Yeah, we should. I deal with that.
It's like your one page. Two wonderful pages.
He did. We always get a presentation. Right after the here.